When I was 16, she looked me in the eye at a lavish dinner party and told me to stop calling her mom. "Call me Valerie," she commanded. I did not argue. I simply obeyed. 12 years later, when she fell to her knees begging me to call her mom again, I smiled and used the exact name she had chosen. That was the moment she realized that a single sentence spoken once can carry a consequence that lasts a lifetime. My name is Delaney Cross, and standing in the wings of the Summit Grand Hotel ballroom, I felt less like a person and more like a finely tuned instrument about to be played. The air back here smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and the heavy floral perfume of wealthy donors, a scent that always made the back of my throat itch. Out there, beyond the heavy velvet curtains, 500 of Denver's elite were finishing their roasted beet salads and waiting for the spectacle to begin. I smoothed the silk of my dress, checking my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. I was 28 years old. I was the youngest vice president at Northbridge Integrity Partners, and tonight, I was accepting the Young Integrity Leader Award. The irony of the title was not lost on me, especially considering who was currently marching toward me in 3-inch Louboutins, cutting through the backstage shadows like a shark through dark water. It was Valerie. She looked impeccable, of course. She always did. Her champagne-colored gown caught the dim backstage light, shimmering with every step. Her hair was an architectural marvel of blonde waves, sprayed into a submission so absolute that not even the air conditioning vent overhead could disturb it. But as she got closer, I saw the cracks in the porcelain. Her eyes were wide, too wide, and there was a sheen of perspiration on her upper lip that her matte foundation could not quite conceal. "Delaney," she breathed out, reaching for me. I took a half step back, just enough to stay out of her reach without causing a scene. "You look beautiful," she said, her voice trembling with an emotion that might have been mistaken for pride by anyone who did not know her. But I knew her. I knew the difference between maternal affection and strategic panic. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice level. "What are you doing back here?" "Valerie. You are supposed to be at table 4 with the board members." She closed the distance between us, ignoring my question. She reached out and gripped my bare arms, her fingers digging into my skin with a desperation that bordered on pain. Her eyes searched mine, frantic and wet. "I need you to do something for me," she whispered, the words rushing out in a terrified stream. "When you go out there, when you take the microphone, please, just once." I stared at her, waiting. "Call me Mom," she begged. The request hung in the stale air between us, heavy and grotesque. I blinked, genuinely unsure if I had heard her correctly. "Excuse me. The cameras are rolling. Delaney," she hissed, her voice dropping lower, the mask slipping just enough to reveal the cold calculation underneath. "The live stream is up. My investors are in the front row. The deal for Vivera Wellness is hanging by a thread. And they are worried about my image. They think I'm too cold. They need to see the family connection. They need to see the heart." I looked down at her hands, still clutching my arms. Her knuckles were white. "You want me to lie on stage?" I clarified. While accepting an award for integrity, "It is not a lie," she insisted, her voice rising in pitch before she caught herself and looked around nervously. "I gave birth to you. I raised you. Just say it. Just thank your mom in your speech. One word. Delaney. That is all I am asking. If you do not do this, the funding falls through, everything collapses." I looked at her face. I looked at the expertly applied tear that was threatening to spill over her lower lash line, timed perfectly for emotional blackmail. Then, my eyes drifted lower. I looked at the laminate rectangle pinned to the expensive fabric of her dress. Valerie Cross. It was printed in bold, black sans serif letters. There was no title, there were no honorifics, and there was certainly no 3-letter word starting with M. I gently pried her fingers off my arms. "It says Valerie right there on your chest," I said softly. Her face contorted. "Don't play games with me right now. Not tonight. You have no idea what is at stake." "I have every idea what is at stake," I replied. "You spent 12 years building a brand of independence and strength, ensuring everyone knew you were a woman who needed no one. And now that the narrative does not sell, you want to rewrite the script. You want to use me as a prop to close a business deal. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, muffled by the curtain but unmistakable. And now, to accept the award for Young Integrity Leader, please welcome the woman who is redefining corporate transparency. Valerie grabbed my wrist again. This time, she did not pretend to be gentle. Her nails bit into the soft skin of my inner wrist, a sharp, commanding pinch that I remembered from 1,000 silent corrections in my childhood. "Do not humiliate me," she snarled, the tears vanishing as if they had been sucked back into her tear ducts. "You get out there and you play the part. Delaney, you owe me this." I looked at her hand on my wrist. I remembered being 16 years old, standing in a kitchen in North Carolina, feeling my heart break as she told me I was bad for her image. I remembered the way I had trained myself, night after night, to swallow the words she hated so much. "I owe you nothing." I said, "Ms. Delaney Cross." The announcer shouted. Applause erupted from the ballroom, a wave of noise crashing against the heavy velvet. Valerie squeezed harder, her eyes wide with a threat that used to terrify me. "Do it," she mouthed. "Call me Mom, or I swear to God. Delaney, you will regret it." I pulled my arm free from her grasp. I did not shove her. I did not scream. I just stepped out of her reach, smoothed my dress one last time, and turned toward the sliver of light bleeding through the curtains. "Watch me," I said. I walked through the curtain and into the blinding white light of the stage. The applause was deafening. I could not see the audience, just a sea of darkness punctuated by the red tally lights of the cameras. I walked to the center of the stage, the glass podium rising to meet me like a shield. I placed my hands on the edges of the podium to steady them. I took a breath. The room went quiet, waiting. I knew she was standing just a few feet away, in the shadows, holding her breath. I knew she was praying to a God she only acknowledged when she needed money that I would fall in line. I knew she was waiting for the validation that would save her company, her reputation, and her ego. I leaned into the microphone. "Thank you," I said, my voice echoing through the massive hall. Clear and steady, "This award means a great deal to me because integrity is not just about business. It is about the names we call things. It is about calling the truth by its name, even when it is inconvenient, even when it costs you something." I paused. I looked toward the wings, where I knew she was watching. I could feel her desperation radiating like heat. I would like to dedicate this moment to the woman who taught me the most important lesson about identity and boundaries. I said. The silence in the room was absolute. I could practically hear Valerie exhaling in relief backstage. She thought she had won. She thought I had folded. I looked straight into the lens of the center camera, knowing the feed was being beamed directly to the giant screens on either side of the stage, and likely to the tablets of the investors sitting in the front row. "Thank you," I said, letting the name sit on my tongue for a split second, tasting the copper and the history of it. "Thank you, Valerie." The name hit the room like a gunshot. 12 years before the gala in Denver, the air in our house in Raleigh, North Carolina, smelled of expensive lilies and desperation. I was 16 years old, and I still believed that if I just stood up straight enough and smiled politely enough, I could help my mother get whatever it was she was chasing. That night, she was chasing credibility. The house had been transformed. The clutter of our daily lives had been swept into closets or shoved under beds. In the living room, a dozen strangers in business casual attire were nursing glasses of cheap wine that Valerie had decanted into crystal pitchers to make it look top shelf. These were potential investors, partners, people she needed to impress for her latest venture, something about boutique lifestyle consulting. I was wearing a dress she had bought for me that morning. It was navy blue, stiff, and made me look older than 16. My job was simple past the hors d'oeuvres: smile, and then disappear. I was doing a good job. I had navigated the room twice with a tray of stuffed mushrooms, dodging the flailing gestures of men who liked the sound of their own voices. I saw my mother across the room, standing near the fireplace. She looked radiant. her head thrown back in laughter at something a man in a gray suit had said. She looked happy. I needed to ask her about the caterer we had run out of napkins in the kitchen, and I didn't know where the extras were stored. It seemed like a small, harmless logistical question. I walked up to her, waiting for a lull in the conversation. When the man in the gray suit took a sip of his wine, I stepped forward. "Mom," I started, keeping my voice low. "Excuse me, but I think we are out of—" The change was instantaneous. The smile didn't leave her face, but her eyes went dead. It was a terrifying disconnect, like watching a doll's face freeze while the mechanics inside ground to a halt. She reached out, her hand landing on my shoulder. It looked affectionate to the group, a motherly pat, but her fingers dug into my clavicle with a pressure that was a warning. "Not now, sweetie," she said, her voice bright and airy. "But Mom, I just need to know." She cut me off again, sharper this time. Though she laughed as if I had said something amusing. "Valerie," she corrected me. The word hung there, strange and foreign in the context of our relationship. I blinked, confused. I thought she was making a joke, perhaps mocking the formality of the event. I smiled nervously. "What, call me Valerie," she said. She turned back to the group, her hand still clamping my shoulder. "She is at that age," she told the man in the gray suit, rolling her eyes playfully. "So independent. We are practically sisters at this point." "Are we not?" the man chuckled, eyeing me with a look that made my skin crawl. "Sisters. Right. I can see the resemblance." My stomach turned over. I felt a sudden, hot flush of shame, though I didn't understand why yet. I pulled away slightly. "Valerie," I said, testing the word. It tasted like vinegar. "Excuse us for a moment," she told the group. She steered me away from the fireplace, her grip tightening on my arm as she marched me through the living room, past the clusters of laughing adults, and through the swinging door into the kitchen. The moment the door swung shut, blocking out the noise of the party, she dropped my arm as if I were contaminated. The bright, party hostess smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer annoyance. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed, keeping her voice low but venomous. I backed up against the counter. "I just needed napkins. And why did you say that? Why did you tell me to call you Valerie?" She grabbed a stack of cocktail napkins from the pantry shelf and shoved them into my chest. "Because I am trying to build a brand here." "Delaney," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to get these people to take a woman seriously? Especially a single woman I don't understand." I stammered. "Everyone has kids. It is normal. It is baggage," she snapped. The word hit me harder than a slap. "Baggage. Look at them out there," she continued, gesturing aggressively toward the door. "They want to buy into a lifestyle. They want youth. They want energy. They don't want to be reminded that I have a teenager looming over my shoulder, calling me mom every 5 seconds. It makes me look encumbered." I stared at her. The kitchen lights seemed too bright, humming with a low electrical buzz that hurt my ears. "I am your daughter," I whispered. "I am not an encumbrance." She sighed, a long, exasperated sound, as if she were explaining quantum physics to a toddler. "Obviously, you are my daughter. I am not denying that. But right now, tonight. And whenever we are in public, you need to grow up. You are 16 years old. For God's sake, you are practically an adult. Stop clinging to me with that childish title. It is embarrassing. Embarrassing." My throat felt tight, like someone had wrapped a wire around it. I looked at the woman who had packed my lunchboxes, who had signed my report cards, who had driven me to swim practice, and I realized I was looking at a stranger. Or rather, I was looking at a businesswoman, and I was just an employee who was off-brand. "Just call me Valerie," she said, her tone softening just a fraction, sensing she might have pushed too hard. "It is professional. It is modern. Don't make me lose face. Delaney." She turned and checked her reflection in the dark window of the oven, smoothing her hair. Then, without looking at me again, she pushed through the swinging door and back into the party. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, I counted the tiles on the floor. 142. I focused on breathing. For 4 seconds. Out for 4 seconds. When I finally composed myself, I walked back out into the living room. The atmosphere had shifted. Graham Hale, a man Valerie had been seeing for 3 months, was holding court in the center of the room. He was a tall man with a handshake that felt like a car salesman's and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was pouring wine, acting for all the world like he owned the house. He saw me emerging from the kitchen. "Ah, there she is," he boomed, drawing attention to me. "The little helper." He wrapped an arm around Valerie's waist, pulling her close. "Valerie, your niece is doing a wonderful job," he said, very polite. I froze. "Niece?" I looked at Valerie. She didn't correct him. She didn't step away. She just leaned into him, swirling her wine glass, and smiled. "She is staying with us for a bit while she finishes school," Graham continued, explaining to a couple standing nearby. "You know how it is. Family helps family." I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. I wasn't just an encumbrance anymore. I was being rewritten in real time. I was a niece. I was a temporary guest. I was someone passing through. Valerie caught my eye. She raised her eyebrows slightly. A silent command. "Play along." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the tray of stuffed mushrooms and shout that I lived here, that my name was on the height chart in the pantry, that I was her child. But I looked at her eyes. They were cold, expectant, and hard. If I caused a scene now, I knew with absolute certainty that I wouldn't just be grounded. I would be exiled. I walked over to the group. My legs felt heavy, as if I were wading through concrete. I stopped in front of her. I didn't look at Graham. I didn't look at the investors. I looked straight at her. "Valerie," I said. The word came out quiet, but steady. She beamed. It was a victory smile. "Yes, dear," she asked. I have a headache." I lied. "May I be excused to go to my room?" Her smile widened. She looked relieved. She looked proud. Even, not proud of me, but proud of her management skills. She had fixed the glitch. "Of course," she said, reaching out to pat my cheek, a gesture more theatrical than affectionate. "Go rest. We will handle things down here." "Thank you, Valerie," I said again. I turned and walked toward the stairs. I felt the eyes of the room on my back. I heard Graham say something about good kids, and the conversation flowed back into business, erasing me instantly. I climbed the stairs one by one. I walked down the hallway to my bedroom and closed the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it softly, engaging the latch with a quiet click. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. Below me, the murmur of the party continued. I heard a burst of laughter, Valerie's laugh. It was loud and carefree, the laugh of a woman who had successfully shed the weight she didn't want to carry. I sat there and stared at the wall. I didn't cry. Tears seemed useless now. Crying was something a child did when they wanted their mother. But I didn't have a mother anymore. I had Valerie. And as I sat there, listening to the clinking of glasses downstairs, a cold resolve settled in my chest, filling the hollow space where my hurt used to be. She wanted a relationship based on names, fine. She wanted to draw a line in the sand. I lay back on my pillow and stared at the ceiling. From this moment on, I decided. She would never hear the word mom from my lips again. Not when I graduated, not when I got married, not if she was dying. She had asked for Valerie. She was going to get exactly what she asked for. The weeks following the party were a strange experiment in compliance. I did exactly what I was told, and I watched as the reality of it slowly began to rot the edges of Valerie's perfect picture. At first, she enjoyed it, when we were out at the grocery store or the mall, and I addressed her as Valerie. She would stand a little taller, flashing a conspiratorial smile at the cashier, as if we were two sisters navigating the world together. She loved the ambiguity of it. She loved that for a fleeting moment, strangers might look at her smooth skin and my height and do the math in her favor. But the novelty began to wear off when we ran into people who actually knew us. We were in the produce section of the local market when we bumped into Mrs. Gable, our neighbor from 3 doors down who had known me since I was in kindergarten. "Oh, hello." Delaney. "Mrs. Gable chirped, leaning over her cart. "Is your mother trying out that new kale recipe? I didn't look at the kale." I looked directly at Mrs. Gable and pointed to the woman standing 5 feet away inspecting an avocado. "Valerie is right there." "Mrs. Gable," I said, "you can ask her yourself." The air between the three of us seemed to snap. Mrs. Gable blinked, her smile faltering. She looked from me to my mother, confusion wrinkling her forehead. Children in Raleigh did not call their mothers by their first names. It implied an estrangement, a disrespect, or a coldness that polite society tried to hide behind closed doors. Valerie froze. She sensed the judgment radiating off Mrs. Gable. She let out a tinkling, nervous laugh and touched my arm. "Oh, we are just trying to be less formal, aren't we?" Sweetie Valerie said, her voice a little too high. I stepped out of her reach. "I am just doing what you asked." "Valerie." Mrs. Gable didn't say anything else. She just gave a tight nod and hurried toward the dairy aisle. Valerie glared at me, her eyes narrowing into slits, but she couldn't say a word. I had followed her rules to the letter. That was the summer I learned that silence could be a weapon, but invisibility was a curse, and nowhere was I more invisible than when my brother, Braden, was in the room. Braden was 19, 3 years older than me, and he was the sun around which Valerie's entire emotional universe orbited. He was handsome in a soft, unformed way, with the kind of eyes that always looked slightly watery, prompting people to ask if he was okay. He was currently living in the basement, taking a gap year that had turned into 2, ostensibly attending community college classes that he rarely spoke about. Valerie called him sensitive. She called him an old soul. I called him a liability. In June, I found a summer program at Duke University for high school students interested in pre-law and ethics. It cost $1,200, but it included room and board and 3 college credits. I had the grades. I had the recommendation letters. I just needed the deposit. I brought the brochure to the dinner table. Graham Hale was there, eating a steak Valerie had cooked specifically to his liking, rare, bloody, and seasoned with expensive truffle salt. "I was wondering if we could discuss this," I said, sliding the brochure across the mahogany table toward her. "It is a great opportunity. It would look amazing on my college applications." Valerie barely glanced at it. She was busy cutting Braden's steak for him, because he had mentioned his wrist was sore from playing video games. "Not this summer." "Delaney," she said dismissively. "Why not?" I asked. "I can work part-time to pay back half the fee." "It is not about the money," she sighed, finally looking up. "Although, frankly, money is tight right now. It is about the atmosphere in the house. Braden is going through a very difficult time. He is stressed about his finals. He needs peace and quiet, and he needs his family close. If you go running off to some dorm room, it will disrupt the dynamic." I looked at Braden. He was chewing slowly, staring at his phone, completely unbothered by the fact that his stress was costing me my future. "He is taking 2 classes. Valerie," I said, keeping my voice level. "Introduction to film and bowling. I don't think my absence will shatter his world." Graham chuckled, but Valerie slammed her fork down. "That is exactly the attitude I'm talking about," she snapped. "You are so hard on him. You have always been the strong one. Delaney, you are durable. Braden feels things more deeply than you do. He is fragile right now." I sat back in my chair, the injustice of it settling in my stomach like a stone. "You are the strong one." It sounded like a compliment, but I knew what it really was. It was a dismissal. It meant I didn't require maintenance. It meant my feelings didn't need to be managed because I wouldn't break things if I got upset. It meant I could be neglected. 2 weeks later, the fragile Braden got arrested. It wasn't a huge crime, but it was messy. He and 2 friends had been caught breaking into the chemistry lab at the community college not to steal chemicals, but to smash beakers for fun. They were drunk. Valerie went into crisis mode. It was terrifying to watch how efficient she was. She made 3 phone calls before she even put her shoes on. She called a lawyer friend of Graham's. She called the dean, whom she had met at a fundraiser. She transferred $2,000 from a savings account I didn't know existed to pay for the damages immediately. By the time Braden was back on the living room couch, weeping into a pillow about how the security guard had been mean to him, the charges had been dropped to a misdemeanor that would likely vanish with community service. I stood in the doorway, watching her stroke his hair. "Go to your room, Delaney," she said without looking at me. "And not a word of this to anyone. Not to the neighbors, not to your friends. This never happened. We have to protect his reputation." I walked up the stairs, thinking about the $1,200 she didn't have for my education and the $2,000 she instantly found for his vandalism. Graham Hale was over almost every night by July. He wasn't just a boyfriend anymore. He was the primary audience for the play Valerie was staging. She needed him to see a perfect, affluent, harmonious family, which is why she insisted on the portrait. She hired a photographer who charged $500 an hour. She made us all wear matching white linen shirts and jeans, a cliché that made my skin crawl. We were posed in the backyard, under the weeping willow tree. "Smile, everyone. It looks like you love each other," the photographer shouted. Valerie was seated on a bench. Braden was sitting at her feet, looking adequately brooding. Graham stood behind her, hand on her shoulder. I was positioned next to her. "Lean in. Delaney," the photographer instructed. "Closer to your mother." I leaned in. The smell of her perfume Chanel No. 5 filled my nose. For a split second, my brain short-circuited. The muscle memory of childhood took over. I saw stray hair caught in her lip gloss. "Mom, your hair is—" I started, reaching up instinctively to fix it. Her hand moved faster than a snake strike. She didn't slap me. That would have left a mark. Instead, her hand shot up and clamped onto my chin. Her fingers dug into my jawbone, freezing my head in place. It looked almost affectionate from a distance, like she was tilting my face toward the light. But the pressure was bruising. She turned her face to mine, smiling for the camera, but her eyes were black pits of rage. "What is my name?" she whispered through her teeth, her thumb pressing hard enough to cut off my circulation. I stared at her. The pain was sharp, but the clarity was sharper. "Valerie," I said. She held my jaw for 1 second longer, asserting her dominance, making sure I understood that even my reflexes were subject to her approval. Then she released me and smoothed my hair. "Perfect," shouted the photographer. "That is a keeper." I didn't rub my jaw. I didn't cry. I just stood there in the white linen shirt, feeling the ghost of her grip on my face. That was the moment I stopped looking for a mother. I stopped feeling hurt. Instead, I started feeling something else: cold curiosity. I began to watch her not as a daughter, but as a forensic accountant of emotional crimes. I cataloged every lie. I memorized every transaction. 3 days later, I was cleaning up the study, another chore assigned to me because the housekeeper disturbed Braden's vibes. The mail was piled on the desk. Usually, Valerie sorted it immediately, hiding bills and bank statements in her locked drawer, but she had been distracted lately, too busy planning a weekend getaway with Graham. I was stacking the envelopes when one slid out from the middle of the pile. It was thick, heavy cream paper, expensive. The return address was a law firm in Charleston, South Carolina, but it was the addressee that made me stop breathing. To the estate of Eleanor Ward, for the benefit of Delaney Cross. Eleanor Ward. Education Trust. Eleanor Ward was my grandmother Valerie's mother, who had died when I was 4. Valerie rarely spoke of her, claiming they had a complicated relationship. I held the envelope. It had been opened. The flap was torn jaggedly, as if someone had ripped into it in a hurry. I looked at the door. The house was silent. Valerie was at the gym. Braden was asleep, my hands trembling. I pulled the folded letter out of the envelope. It was a quarterly statement. My eyes scanned the rows of numbers, understanding only half of what I was seeing. But understanding enough. There was a balance, a large one, and there was a withdrawal made 2 weeks ago. I looked at the date of the withdrawal. It was the exact same day Braden had been arrested. I looked at the amount. It was exactly $2,000. and under the section labeled Authorized Educational Expenses, someone had handwritten a note in blue ink, my mother's handwriting, labeling the withdrawal as tuition assistance, D, cross. I lowered the paper. The room seemed to tilt. She hadn't just paid for Braden's crime with her own money. She had paid for it with mine. I held the letter from the Eleanor Ward estate in my hands, my thumbs rubbing against the raised seal of the law firm. The language was dry, dense with legal jargon, but one sentence stood out with crystal clarity, printed in bold type. Funds are to be released solely for the educational advancement of the beneficiary. Delaney Cross, solely, educational, advancement. I walked into the living room where Valerie was flipping through a catalog of interior design trends. She did not look up when I entered. I found a letter. I said, keeping my voice neutral. From Grandmother Eleanor. Valerie froze mid-page. Her hand hovered over a picture of a beige sectional sofa. She turned the page slowly, deliberately, before looking at me. You should not be going through my mail. Delaney, she said. It is a federal offense. It was addressed to me, I countered, holding up the envelope. It says there is trust. It says the money is for my education. Valerie laughed. A short, sharp sound that sounded like glass breaking. She stood up and walked over to me. Snatching the letter from my hand before I could pull it away, she folded it casually, as if it were a flyer for a pizza place, and tossed it onto the side table. You are 16, she said, patting my cheek. You think you understand these things, but you do not. Trusts are complex financial instruments. That money is not liquid. It is tied up in investments, administrative fees, taxes. By the time the lawyers take their cut, there is barely enough to buy a textbook, but I saw a withdrawal. I said, 2 weeks ago, for $2,000. Valerie's eyes hardened. She stepped closer, invading my personal space. Administrative costs. She lied smoothly. And paying back the estate for previous maintenance. Do not worry your pretty little head about money. Delaney. That is the adult's job. 2 days later, the adults proved just how bad they were at their job. I received an email from the financial aid officer at the prep school I attended on a partial scholarship. The subject line was urgent. Missing documentation. I opened it in the school library. My stomach nodding. They had received my application for the senior year grant, but the tax forms my mother had submitted, or rather, the lack thereof, had flagged my file. The email stated clearly that the income stated on the application did not match the lifestyle indicators on public record, and they were missing the primary household earner's signature. I went home that afternoon intending to beg her to sign the forms, but I never made it past the driveway. There was a car parked in front of the garage. It was a sleek, cherry red convertible. A used model, but polished to a shine that hurt the eyes. Braden was leaning against the hood, wearing sunglasses, looking like he had just stepped out of a music video. Check it out, he called out as I walked up the driveway. Sweet ride, right? I stared at the car. Whose is this mine? He grinned, tapping the roof. Finally got my wheels. I needed something reliable to get to me. You know, interviews and stuff. Reliable. It was a 2-seat sports car. Valerie came out of the front door, clapping her hands. It looks wonderful. Braden. You look so professional. I walked past Braden to the passenger side, where a folder of dealership paperwork was sliding off the seat. I picked it up before anyone could stop me. Hey, do not touch the leather, Braden shouted. I ignored him. I scanned the invoice. The sale price was $22,000, but it was the line item below that made my blood run cold. Down payment, $5,000. Method bank transfer, Ward Trust. I dropped the paper back onto the seat. $5,000. That was not administrative costs. That was not tax. That was my college tuition. Sitting on 4 rubber tires so my brother could drive to imaginary interviews. Valerie saw me looking. She rushed over, snatching the folder and shoving it into the glove compartment. He is paying the monthly installments, she hissed at me, her voice low so the neighbors would not hear. He needs a win. Delaney, he needs confidence. This is an investment in his future. And what about my future, I asked. What about my financial aid forms? We will figure it out. She waved her hand dismissively. Stop being so selfish. To prove she wasn't playing favorites, Valerie announced that Friday night would be a celebration dinner. She told me it was to celebrate my high PSAT scores, a result I had achieved 3 weeks prior without a single tutor. I foolishly let myself feel a flicker of hope. Maybe she did care. Maybe the car was a mistake she was trying to balance out. I put on my best dress. I came downstairs. The dining room was set for 12 people, aunts, uncles, and a few of Valerie's business associates. But when the time came for the toast, Valerie did not raise her glass to my test scores. She stood up, tinkling a spoon against her champagne flute. I want to propose a toast. She beamed, placing a hand on Braden's shoulder. To my son, Braden, who has decided to launch his own digital content creation studio. He is taking a brave step into the entrepreneurial world, just like his mother. To Braden. To Braden, the room echoed. I sat there, gripping my napkin under the table. There was no mention of my scores, no mention of the scholarship I was in danger of losing. I was just the extra in the scene, the silent daughter filling the empty chair to make the table look balanced. I looked at my aunt, Sarah, who was sitting across from me. She was a kind woman, but distant. Is everything okay? Dear, she asked quietly, you have hardly touched your roast. I looked at Valerie, who was basking in the glow of Braden's non-existent success. I looked at Braden, who was already tipsy on the wine Valerie had let him drink. I put my fork down. Valerie, I said, loudly. The conversation at the table did not stop immediately, but it faltered. Valerie, could you pass the salt, I asked? Valerie froze. She turned her head slowly toward me. Her smile was tight, a rictus of warning. Of course, sweetie, she said, sliding the shaker over, but I wasn't done. Valerie, are we going to discuss the school forms later, I asked, my voice cutting through the chatter. Because the deadline is Monday. Now the table went silent. Aunt Sarah frowned. Valerie, Aunt Sarah asked, looking from me to my mother, why does she call you that? Val. The question hung in the air like a foul smell. It was the question no one had dared to ask for months. Valerie's face turned a shade of pale that clashed with her foundation. She laughed, a high, strangled sound. Oh, you know teenagers, she said, waving her hand. It is a phase, an inside joke. It is not a joke, I said, looking straight at Aunt Sarah. She asked me to. She said calling her mom makes her look old and encumbered. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Graham Hale coughed into his napkin. Braden looked at his plate. Aunt Sarah looked at Valerie with an expression of pure horror. Valerie stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. Delaney, help me in the kitchen with the dessert, she commanded. She did not wait for me to answer. She marched into the kitchen. I followed. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to see her face when the mask came off. The moment the kitchen door swung shut, she spun around. She did not grab me this time. She looked at me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. You little witch, she spat. You want to ruin me. Is that it? You want to humiliate me in front of my family, in front of my investors. You humiliated yourself, I said calmly. You spent my trust fund on a sports car. You refused to sign my school papers. And you told me to call you Valerie. I am just following the rules you set. She took a step toward me, her hand raising as if to strike. Get out, she hissed. Get to your room before I ding-dong. The doorbell rang. It was a cheerful, bright sound that shattered the tension in the kitchen. Valerie froze. She took a deep breath, smoothing her dress, composing her face into the mask of the perfect hostess. We are not done, she whispered. She pushed past me, walking back through the dining room to the front door. I followed. Standing in the archway of the hall, Valerie opened the door. Standing on the porch was a woman I had not seen in 10 years. She was wearing a trench coat damp with rain, and she held a leather travel bag. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and focused. She looked past Valerie, past the confused guests, and her gaze landed directly on me. She stepped inside, ignoring Valerie's stunned silence. "Delaney," the woman said, her voice warm and steady, sounding like a safety net I had forgotten existed. "Do you remember Aunt Tessa?" Tessa Ward did not wait for an invitation. She stepped fully into the foyer, dropping her wet travel bag onto the pristine hardwood floor with a heavy thud that echoed like a gavel strike. The sound made Graham flinch. Valerie recovered her composure first, though the smile she plastered onto her face was brittle enough to shatter with a tap. "Tessa," she exclaimed, forcing a tone of delighted surprise. "We had no idea you were coming. You should have called. We are just in the middle of a little family celebration." Tessa unbuttoned her trench coat, her eyes scanning the room with the precision of a hawk spotting movement in tall grass. She ignored Valerie's greeting entirely. "I heard Delaney got a perfect score on her PSATs," Tessa said, her voice cool and carrying a distinct southern lilt that usually sounded warm but now sounded like steel wrapped in velvet. "I assumed you would be throwing a party for her. I wanted to see my niece." She walked past Valerie and into the dining room. Her gaze landed on the "Congratulations Braden" banner that hung limply over the sideboard. She looked at the cake, which had "Future CEO" written on it in blue icing. Then she looked at me. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. "Hi, Aunt Tessa," I said. She looked me up and down, taking in the dress I had outgrown, the lack of food on my plate, and the sheer exhaustion that I knew was etched into my face. "Hello, Delaney," she said softly. "You look thin." "I am fine," I said automatically. Valerie rushed into the room, clapping her hands again, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Well, since you are here, pull up a chair." "Delaney, get your aunt a plate. We were just toasting Braden's new business venture." I moved to obey, but Tessa held up a hand. "I am not hungry, Valerie, and I'm certainly not here to celebrate Braden buying a sports car with money he does not have." The room went dead silent. Braden choked on his wine. Graham stared at the tablecloth. Valerie's eyes darted around the table to her investors. She offered a tight, apologetic smile. "Sisters, right?" She laughed nervously. Always so dramatic. "Tessa, let's talk in the kitchen." "No," Tessa said, planting her feet. "We will talk right here. I drove 5 hours because I had a bad feeling. Valerie, and walking into this house, seeing that banner, and seeing that car in the driveway. My feeling was right." I stepped forward, trying to diffuse the tension before Valerie exploded. "Valerie, maybe we should just—" Tessa whipped her head toward me. Her eyes narrowed. "What did you just call her?" she asked. I froze. I had done it out of habit. It has become muscle memory over the last few months. "I called her Valerie," I said quietly. Tessa looked at her sister. "Why is your 16-year-old daughter calling you by your first name?" Valerie straightened her spine, smoothing the front of her dress. She lifted her chin, adopting the haughty, superior tone she used when she felt cornered. "We decided it was best," Valerie said. "I want Delaney to be independent. I want her to see me as a person, as a mentor, not just a domestic servant. It helps her grow up. It fosters autonomy." Tessa stared at her. The silence stretched for 5 long seconds. "Autonomy," Tessa repeated, her voice dropping an octave. "You think stripping a child of her connection to her mother is autonomy? That isn't independence. Valerie, that is erasure. You are not teaching her to stand on her own. You are teaching her that she does not belong to anyone. I only want what is best for her brand," Valerie argued, the word slipping out before she could catch it. "Her brand," Tessa laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "She is a child. She does not have a brand. She has a mother, or at least, she is supposed to." Valerie's face flushed a deep, angry red. She stepped closer to Tessa. "You do not get to come into my house and lecture me on how to raise my children. Tessa, you have no idea what it takes to keep this lifestyle afloat. You have no idea the sacrifices I make to keep this roof over their heads." I watched them, feeling like a ghost in my own dining room. This was the narrative I had lived with for years. Valerie, the martyr, Valerie, the struggling single mother fighting against the world. "Is that so?" Tessa asked quietly. You keep this roof over their heads. Yes, Valerie hissed. I work myself to the bone. Tessa reached into her purse. She pulled out a folded stack of papers and tossed them onto the dining table. They slid across the polished wood, stopping right in front of the man in the gray suit, Valerie's potential investor. He looked down. I looked down. They were bank transfer records. Then I suggest you explain to everyone here, Tessa said, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. Why I have been wiring you $4,000 a month for the last 3 years to pay the mortgage on this house. The air left the room. I stared at the papers. $4,000. Every month. For 3 years. Valerie went pale. She reached for the papers, but her hand was shaking so badly she knocked over a wine glass. Red wine spilled across the white tablecloth, looking like a gunshot wound spreading. That is a loan, Valerie stammered. A bridge loan. It is charity. Valerie? Tessa corrected her brutally. I paid off your credit card debt in 2015. I paid for the roof repairs last autumn. I have been keeping this family solvent because I thought you were actually trying. I thought you were providing a stable home for Delaney. I looked at Valerie. The powerful, independent businesswoman, the woman who told me I was a burden, the woman who said I damaged her image. She wasn't a titan of industry. She was a fraud subsidized by the sister she despised. And this, Tessa continued, pulling a second document from her bag. This is the activity log for the Eleanor Ward Education Trust. Braden stopped chewing. He looked at the door as if calculating the distance to his new car. Valerie lunged. Give me that. Tessa stepped back, holding the document out of reach. Grandmother Eleanor set this up for Delaney's education, Tessa said, addressing the room. Not for lifestyle maintenance, not for sports cars. I am the secondary trustee. Valerie, did you forget that? Did you forget that I get a notification if the withdrawal patterns look suspicious? She turned to me. Delaney, she said gently. There is a clause in the trust. It demands an audit if funds are misused. And looking at that car outside, and the lack of financial aid forms for your school, I am initiating that audit tomorrow morning. Valerie gasped. You cannot. They will freeze the assets. I have bills due. That is not my problem anymore, Tessa said. I am cutting the monthly transfers. Valerie, effective immediately, and I am petitioning the court to remove you as the primary trustee for breach of fiduciary duty. She turned back to me. Her expression softened, the steel melting into something warm and safe. Pack your bags. Delaney. I blinked. What, you are coming to Charleston with me? Tessa said. You can finish your senior year there. There is a great school 3 blocks from my house. You will have your own room, a real room, and I promise you, no one will ever ask you to pretend you don't exist. I looked at Valerie. She was trembling. Her empire was crumbling in real time. The investors were already standing up, checking their watches, muttering excuses about early mornings. Graham was aggressively texting someone on his phone, inching away from her. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Don't fear me. Fear of me. Fear of what would happen if the prop she used to balance her life walked out the door. You cannot take her, Valerie whispered. She is a minor. She is 16, Tessa said. In the eyes of the court, given what I can prove about financial exploitation. She has a voice. I looked at the stairs. I thought about my room with the lock I had to buy myself. I thought about the sister's comment in the grocery store. I thought about the tuition money sitting in the driveway. I will pack, I said. Valerie rushed forward. She grabbed my hands. Her palms were sweaty. Delaney, no, baby, listen to me. She was crying now. Real tears. Ugly, panicked tears. You cannot leave me. Everything is falling apart. I need you here. We can fix this. I will sign the papers. I will sell the car. Just, please, don't go with her. She does not understand us. She does not understand our bond. I looked down at her hands gripping mine. Call me Mom, she sobbed, her voice breaking. Please, baby, just call me Mom. Tell her we are fine. I gently pulled my hands away. I felt a strange sense of calm washing over me. It was the calm of a decision that had actually been made 12 years ago, or perhaps 2 weeks ago in a kitchen when she grabbed my face, or maybe just 5 minutes ago when I saw the bank transfers. I looked her in the eye. "Valerie," I said softly. She flinched as if I had slapped her. "I was 16 when you told me to stop using that word." I said, "You told me to grow up. You told me to be independent. You told me to listen." I picked up my purse from the chair. I listened. "Valerie, I listened to every word you said. And now, I am listening to myself." I turned my back on her. "I will be ready in 10 minutes. Aunt Tessa," I said, and I walked up the stairs without looking back, leaving Valerie Cross standing in the ruin of her own design, sobbing for a daughter she had erased years ago. The rain that night did not feel like a storm. It felt like a car wash, scrubbing the last 16 years of grime off my skin as we drove south on Interstate 95. I sat in the passenger seat of Aunt Tessa's Volvo, my forehead pressed against the cool glass, watching the lights of Raleigh blur into streaks of red and gold before vanishing into the darkness. There was no cinematic goodbye. Valerie had not chased the car down the driveway. She had not stood on the porch in the rain. She had simply slammed the door the moment I turned my back, locking herself in with her pride and her denial. I did not cry. I checked my pulse. It was slow, steady. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for impact. We arrived in Charleston at 2 a.m. Tessa lived in a small, weathered, yellow house near the marsh, the kind of place that smelled of old wood, salt water, and lemon polish. She carried my bag inside and led me to a room at the end of the hall. "This is yours," she said, setting the bag down. I stood in the doorway. It was a simple room, a twin bed with a quilt, a wooden desk by the window, a bookshelf that was empty, waiting. "For how long?" I asked. Tessa turned and looked at me, her expression serious. "Until you decide to leave. Delaney, this is not a guest room. It is your room. I slept for 14 hours straight. When I woke up, the sun was slicing through the blinds, dust motes dancing in the light. I walked out into the kitchen, expecting to be handed a list of chores or a scolding for sleeping so late. Instead, Tessa was sitting at the table with a mug of coffee and a notepad. She looked up and smiled. "Good afternoon," she said. "I was just making a grocery list. What do you want for dinner?" I froze. My hand gripped the doorframe. In Valerie's house, dinner was whatever Valerie wanted, or whatever diet she was currently trying, or whatever Graham preferred. If I was hungry for something else, I was told I was being difficult. I ate anything. I stammered, "Whatever is easiest." Tessa put her pen down. "That is not what I asked," she said gently. "I asked what you wanted. Do you like tacos, lasagna? We can grill burgers." I stared at her. My throat felt tight. "Burgers," I whispered. "With cheese." "Burgers it is," she said, writing it down. That small moment, that simple question about ground beef and buns, broke something inside me. It was the first crack in the wall I had built to survive. I realized then that I wasn't just a roommate here. I was a person. 2 weeks later, Tessa helped me get a job. She knew the owner of a small shop downtown called Harbor and Ink Books. It was a narrow, dusty place with floor-to-ceiling shelves and a ladder that slid on a brass rail. The owner, a gruff man named Mr. Abernathy, hired me on the spot because I knew how to alphabetize, and I didn't look like I would steal from the register. I loved that job. I loved the smell of paper and glue. I loved the silence. I loved that books, unlike my mother, were consistent. The words on page 42 were the same today as they would be tomorrow. They didn't change the rules based on who was watching. Between shelving shifts, I sat at the back counter and worked on my college applications. Tessa sat with me sometimes, not to dictate my essays, but to proofread them. She taught me how to fill out the FAFSA forms as an emancipated minor, a legal distinction we were working toward with her lawyer. One afternoon, I knocked over a stack of hardcovers. They crashed to the floor with a sound like a thunderclap. I scrambled to my knees, my heart hammering. "I am sorry," I shouted, wincing, waiting for the yelling to start. "I am so sorry. I am clumsy. I will pay for any damage. Please don't be mad. Mr. Abernathy looked up from his newspaper. Delaney, he said calmly. I flinched. It is just books, kid. He grunted. Pick them up. You don't have to apologize for gravity. I picked them up, my hands shaking. I realized I had spent my entire life apologizing for gravity, for taking up space, for breathing too loud, while I was building a new life. The old one kept trying to claw its way back through my phone screen. Valerie texted me constantly. Her messages were a chaotic mix of guilt, rage, and sudden, terrifying affection. I miss my baby girl. The house is so quiet without you. Then, 3 hours later. Did you tell Tessa about the credit card? You had no right to air our dirty laundry. And then, the real reason the mortgage is due on the 1st. Graham is between checks. Tell Tessa to call me. She blocked my number. I never replied. I read them like I was reading a case study of a stranger. I realized Valerie didn't miss me. She missed the buffer I provided. She missed the extra pair of hands. She missed the leverage she had over Tessa. I wasn't a daughter to her. I was a utility bill she had forgotten to pay. It was at the bookstore that I met Reed Carter. He came in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always ordering a black coffee from the small cafe corner and sitting at the table near the law section. He was maybe 22, with messy brown hair and a stack of textbooks that looked heavy enough to kill a man. One rainy Tuesday, he saw me staring at the spine of a book titled Introduction to Fiduciary Law. Light reading, he asked, not looking up from his highlighter. I am trying to understand something, I said, pulling the book off the shelf. I want to know what happens when someone breaks a trust. He looked up then. He had kind eyes, tired but sharp. Legally or emotionally, he asked. Both, I said, but mostly the legal part. The emotional part does not have a statute of limitations. He smiled. A crooked, genuine thing. I am Reed, he said. I am Delaney. Reed didn't push. He didn't ask for my tragic backstory. He just started leaving books on the counter for me. Contract Law for Beginners, Asset Forfeiture and Rights, The Ethics of Guardianship. I devoured them. I wasn't reading to find a way to sue Valerie. I was reading because for the first time, I understood that the world had rules, real rules, not the arbitrary, shifting rules of my mother's house, but codified, enforceable laws. I learned about the duty of care. I learned about misappropriation of funds. I learned that what Valerie had done with the Eleanor Ward Trust wasn't just borrowing, it was theft. Knowledge became my armor. I stopped feeling like a victim and started feeling like a witness building a case. I wasn't angry anymore. I was informed. 3 months into my stay in Charleston, the humidity broke and the autumn air turned crisp. I was walking home from the bookstore, watching the sunset paint the marsh grass in shades of purple and gold. I felt lighter than I had in years. I had money in my pocket that I had earned. I had an acceptance letter from the local college sitting on my desk. I had Tessa waiting with a pot roast. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a text from Reed about a study group, or another blocked plea from Valerie. It was an unknown number. Area code 919, Raleigh. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but curiosity, that cold, forensic curiosity I had developed, made me swipe green. Hello, I said. There was a pause. I could hear breathing on the other end. Ragged and shallow. Background noise sounded like a busy street or a bar. Delaney Cross, a voice whispered. It was female. Raspy, as if the speaker was trying to disguise it. Yes, I said, stopping on the sidewalk. Who is this? You don't know me, the voice said. But I know your mother. I used to work at the bank branch on Fayetteville Street. I gripped the phone tighter. What do you want? I saw the audit request come through, the woman said quickly, rushing the words. From your aunt. They are looking into the withdrawal history. Okay, I said slowly. They are going to check the signature cards. She continued. Listen to me carefully. Delaney, you need to pull the original authorization forms from 3 years ago, not the digital copies, the physical ones. Why, I asked, my heart starting to pound against my ribs. Because the woman whispered, dropping her voice so low I had to strain to hear. Valerie didn't just spend the money. She didn't just move it. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. She didn't sign those withdrawal slips. Delaney, you did. I stood frozen on the sidewalk. I never signed anything. I said, I didn't even know the trust existed until 3 months ago. I know, the woman said. But on paper, you authorized every single cent. Someone practiced your handwriting. Someone made you the thief of your own future. The line clicked dead. I lowered the phone. The streetlights flickered on above me, casting long, distorted shadows on the pavement. I felt the blood drain from my face. Valerie hadn't just stolen from me. She had framed me. The requested documents from the bank arrived in a thick, sealed envelope delivered by a private courier. I sat at my desk in Charleston, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floorboards, and sliced the package open. My hands were steady. I was not looking for a smoking gun anymore. I was building a timeline. I spread the photocopies across my desk. On the left, I placed a calendar I had reconstructed from memory and old social media posts. On the right, the withdrawal slips from the Eleanor Ward Education Trust. The pattern emerged with the subtlety of a neon sign. October 14th, 3 years ago, a withdrawal of $4,000. Corresponding event. Valerie posted a photo on Instagram of a much-needed spa retreat in Sedona to reset her chakras. January 12th, 2 years ago, a withdrawal of $6,000. Corresponding event. Valerie launched her short-lived boutique consultancy firm, Velvet Vine, which required a launch party that featured a champagne tower and a hired string quartet. July 8th, last year, a withdrawal of $3,500. Corresponding event. The down payment on the new white leather furniture set for the living room. Because the old set had bad energy, I picked up one of the withdrawal slips. The signature at the bottom read, Delaney Cross. It was good. It was terrifyingly good. She had mastered the loop of the D and the sharp, impatient slash of the S at the end. But it was too perfect. My handwriting when I was 16 was messy, hurried, the script of a girl always rushing to get out of the room. This signature was deliberate. It was the work of an artist painting a forgery. I felt a vibration against the wood of the desk. My phone, a text from Valerie. I was looking at your baby pictures today. You were so cute in that yellow sun hat. I miss you. D, this silence is killing me. I stared at the screen. The pivot had begun. For weeks, she had been silent, seething in the wreckage of her exposed finances. Now, she was realizing that anger was not a currency I accepted anymore, so she was trying to pay with nostalgia. She was trying to weaponize the memory of a mother I had not had in years. I did not reply. I filed the screenshot of the text into a folder on my laptop labeled Communication Log. An hour later, the bad cop arrived. You wrecked the house. The message from Braden read, Valerie is crying in her room. Graham is threatening to leave because of the stress. Are you happy now, you selfish brat? I looked at the text. I could hear his voice, whiny and entitled, the voice of a boy who had never been told no. I typed a response, my fingers moving calmly over the glass. Do not address me that way. Braden, if you want to speak to me, you will use respectful language. If you continue to harass me, I will block your number and add these messages to the legal discovery file regarding the trust. The 3 dots of his typing bubble appeared, danced for a long time, and then vanished. He did not reply. He was a bully, and bullies panic when their victims start speaking like lawyers. Tessa walked into the room, placing a cup of tea on the corner of my desk. She looked at the spread of financial documents. She is going to escalate, Tessa said quietly. She knows the audit is moving forward. She knows the signature cards are being analyzed. She is running out of road. She is texting me about baby pictures. I said, that is phase 1. Tessa warned, love bombing. When that does not work, she will try to pull you back in with status. She needs to legitimize herself. She needs to show the world that her family is intact. Watch for the public invitation. Tessa was right. She was always right. 2 days later, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line was Family Healing Dinner. Next Saturday, I opened it. The body of the email was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive literary fiction. My dearest Delaney, life is too short for grudges. I know we have had our differences, but we are blood. I want to host a dinner this Saturday at the house. Just family. Just us. I want to apologize and find a path forward. I have made your favorite roast. It sounded sincere. It sounded like a mother reaching out. Then I looked at the header. CC, Arthur Sterling Asterling Sterling Capital. Com. I froze. I knew that name. Arthur Sterling was one of the most prominent angel investors in Raleigh. He was the man Valerie had been trying to court for months to fund her lifestyle brand expansion. She had carbon copied him on a private family apology. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. It wasn't an invitation. It was a performance art piece. She needed Arthur Sterling to see her as a benevolent, forgiving matriarch. She needed him to see that her difficult daughter was being welcomed back into the fold. If I showed up, I was the prop. If I refused, I was the villain who rejected a mother's olive branch. It was a trap, but I wasn't the 16-year-old girl who needed permission to leave the table anymore. I hit reply. I made sure to reply all. Valerie, I am declining this invitation. As we have discussed through Aunt Tessa, I will not be attending any social functions at your residence. Furthermore, I find it inappropriate that you have included a business associate on a personal email regarding family matters. Please remove Mr. Sterling from this thread, as I am sure he has no interest in the details of our estrangement or the pending audit of the Eleanor Ward Trust. Delaney. I pressed send. The response was immediate. My phone rang. It was Valerie. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. Then came the text. The mask was gone. The love bombing was over. I gave you everything the message screamed in all caps. I put clothes on your back. I fed you. I sacrificed my youth for you. How dare you embarrass me in front of Arthur? You are an ungrateful, cold-hearted little snake. I sat back in my chair, watching the words glow on the screen. I typed back slowly. You gave me one thing, Valerie. You taught me the price of the word mom. You taught me that it costs 16 years of obedience and $5,000 of my tuition money. I am not buying it anymore. I didn't stop there. I switched back to email, composing a formal message. I was done playing games. I was done with the emotional guerrilla warfare. To Valerie Cross. Subject terms of contact. Effective immediately. I am establishing the following boundaries. 1. Do not come to Charleston. If you appear at my residence or my place of employment, I will file for a restraining order. 2. Do not contact me via telephone or text message. All communication must be in writing via this email address. 3. Any discussion regarding the Eleanor Ward Trust will be handled exclusively through Aunt Tessa's legal counsel. 4. Do not speak to me about family. We are currently discussing finance and fraud. Keep the subject matter relevant. Delaney Cross. I sent it. I felt a surge of adrenaline, sharp and electric. I had drawn a line in the concrete. I had declared sovereignty over my own life. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark street. I thought it was over for the night. I thought I had won this round of chess. But Valerie was not just a player. She was the one who had invented the game. My phone buzzed one last time. I picked it up, expecting another insult, another threat about money or reputation. It was a single message. You think you are so smart with your rules and your lawyers, but you are forgetting something. Delaney, you are forgetting that I know the truth about you. I frowned. The truth about me. Another bubble appeared. If you do not drop this audit and come home by Sunday, I will tell everyone. I will tell the investors, the neighbors, and your precious Aunt Tessa the truth about where you actually came from. I will tell them whose daughter you really are. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the rug with a dull thud. The cold that washed over me had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was a primal, freezing dread. Whose daughter you really are. I had always assumed Ron Cross, the man who died when I was 2, was my father. I had his last name. I had his eyes, or so I had been told. I stared at the phone on the floor. Valerie wasn't just threatening my future anymore. She was threatening to rewrite my past. The threat about my parentage hung over me for 2 days like a localized storm cloud. But it did not rain. I expected a follow-up text, a scan of a birth certificate, or some dramatic revelation. Instead, I got silence. And in that silence, I realized something important. If Valerie actually had proof that would destroy me, she would have used it the moment I walked out the door. The fact that she was holding it back meant it was not a weapon. It was a desperate bargaining chip. She was not trying to expose me. She was trying to trade a secret for a signature. I went to work at Harbor and Ink on Tuesday morning, determined to treat it like any other day. I shelved the new arrivals in the history section. I made a fresh pot of coffee. I waved to Reed, who was already at his usual table, buried behind a fortress of contract law textbooks. At 10 in the morning, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up. A customer service smile automatically plastered on my face. The smile died instantly. Standing in the doorway was Braden. He looked ridiculous. He was wearing a cashmere sweater that cost more than my monthly rent and designer sunglasses. Despite the fact that it was overcast outside, he stood there, scanning the shop with a look of disdain, until his eyes landed on me. "Delaney," he shouted, throwing his arms wide as if we were in an airport arrivals terminal. "There she is." The few customers in the shop, an elderly woman browsing gardening books and a college student looking for poetry, turned to stare. Braden ignored them. He marched toward the counter, his shoes clicking loudly on the hardwood floor, performing the role of the relieved older brother for an audience that did not exist. "Thank God I found you," he said, leaning over the counter, invading my workspace. "We have been so worried. Valerie is a wreck." I did not step back. I did not flinch. I placed my hands flat on the counter, grounding myself against the wood. "Hello?" "Braden," I said. My voice was low, forcing him to lean in if he wanted to hear me, stripping away his ability to broadcast his performance to the room. "Come on, D," he said, flashing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Pack your stuff. I brought the car. Let's go get lunch. We can talk about this whole misunderstanding." I looked at him. I saw the sweat beading at his hairline. I saw the way his fingers tapped nervously against the glass display case. "Did you drive 5 hours because you missed me?" "Braden," I asked. "Or did you come because Valerie sent you?" He laughed. A nervous, forced sound. "Does it matter?" "We are family. The family shows up. The family does not steal $5,000 from a trust fund to buy a convertible," I said. His smile vanished. He glanced around the shop, checking to see if anyone had heard. "That is a low blow," he hissed. "I told you. That was an investment. And honestly, you are blowing this way out of proportion. Valerie is willing to forgive you for the way you spoke to her. She is willing to let you come home." "I am home," I said, gesturing to the shop, to the city outside. Braden sighed, dropping the act entirely. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. "Look," he said, sliding the paper across the counter. "Just sign this. That is all she needs. It is a modification form for the trust. It just says you retroactively approve the withdrawals as family loans. It clears up the audit." I looked at the paper. It was not a modification form. It was a confession. If I signed it, I would be admitting that I authorized the misuse of funds, effectively clearing Valerie of fraud and legally binding myself to the loss. "You want me to sign a lie?" I said. "She needs this for a loan." Braden snapped, his voice rising again. "She is trying to leverage the house to expand her business, but the bank won't move forward with the audit pending. Just sign the damn paper. Delaney, it is just a formality." I picked up the paper. For a second, Braden looked relieved. Then I slowly tore it in half, and then in half again. "You are not here for me," I said, dropping the pieces into the trash bin behind the counter. "You are here because the bank cut off the tap." You little Braden slammed his hand on the counter. "Excuse me." The voice came from the law section. Reed Carter stood up. He did not look like a student anymore. He looked like a man who knew exactly where the lines were drawn. He walked over to the counter, standing next to me, shoulder to shoulder. "Is there a problem here?" Reed asked. Braden sneered at him. "This is a family matter. Back off." "Library boy, if you are asking her to sign a legal document regarding a trust fund," Reed said calmly, his voice steady and projecting clearly, "then it is a legal matter, and under South Carolina law, coercion of a beneficiary to sign retroactive approval documents is a felony." Braden blinked. He looked from Reed to me. "Who is this guy?" Braden demanded. "Is this who is twisting your head? Valerie said you were being brainwashed. She said Aunt Tessa and some boyfriend were poisoning you against us. No one is poisoning me." "Braden," I said, "I am just reading the fine print. Something you and Valerie never thought I would do." Braden's face turned red. He pointed a finger at me, shaking with rage. "You are destroying this family," he shouted. "Over money, you are selfish. Delaney, you always have been. You think you are better than us? You are nothing without Valerie. She made you." I stepped around the counter. I did not yell. I did not cry. I pointed to the door. "Get out," I said. "You cannot kick me out." He scoffed. "It is a public store. It is a private business." So I corrected him. "And you are harassing an employee. Leave now, or I will call the police and file a report for trespassing. And given the current audit investigation, I do not think you want another police report attached to your name." Braden stared at me. He looked at the phone in my hand. He looked at Reed, who was already dialing a number, his thumb hovering over the call button. He realized he had lost. The tantrum would not work here. The charm would not work here. "Fine," he spat. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. He looked back at me, his eyes full of a petty, vindictive darkness. "You think you are winning because you call her Valerie?" he sneered. "You think that makes you strong? You wait. 12 years from now, when you are alone and no one cares about your little principles, you are going to regret this. You are going to wish you had a mother." I looked him dead in the eye. 12 years from now," I said, "the person with regrets will not be me." He slammed the door so hard the bell jingled violently, a chaotic sound that faded into silence. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of holding my ground. Reed lowered his phone. "Are you okay?" he asked. I looked at the trash can where the torn document lay. "I am better than okay," I said. "I am ready." That afternoon, Tessa and I went to her lawyer's office. We did not just file for an audit. We filed a formal petition for the removal of Valerie Cross as trustee, citing breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement, and forgery. We attached the timeline I had built. We attached the affidavit from the bank teller who had called me. We attached the text messages. It was not a drama. It was paperwork. It was thick, boring, bureaucratic paperwork, and it was the most satisfying thing I had ever done. We did not hear from Valerie again. The legal wall had gone up, and her lawyer must have told her that any direct contact would be used against her in court. The silence that followed was not empty. It was peaceful. I finished my senior year. I graduated with honors. I went to college in Charleston, paying my own way with student loans, and the part of the trust that the court managed to recover, which was about 60% of what should have been there. I studied finance. I studied ethics. I specialized in forensic accounting. I spent 4 years learning exactly how people hide the truth, and 4 more years learning how to dig it out. Fast forward. I was 28 years old. I was sitting in an office in Denver, Colorado, looking at a view of the Rocky Mountains. The glass door behind me bore the etched logo of Northbridge Integrity Partners. It was my first week as a vice president. I had been hired specifically for my ability to sniff out reputational risk in high-stakes mergers. My job was to look at companies that claimed to be ethical and find the skeletons in their closets before the investors wrote the check. My assistant, a sharp young woman named Sarah, walked in and placed a thick file on my desk. "New client," she said. "I just came in this morning. They are looking for a Series B funding round, about $10 million. They need a full vetting and a character risk assessment on the founder." I picked up my coffee. "Who is the client?" A lifestyle and wellness brand, Sarah said. They are based in North Carolina, but they are expanding nationally. The investors are worried the CEO is a bit volatile. They want you to take a look. I opened the file. The first page was a glossy marketing brochure. It featured a woman standing in a sunlit field of lavender, her arms open to the sky, looking serene, powerful, and maternal. The text beneath the photo read, "Healing from the inside out." I looked at the face in the photo. It was older. There was a little more filler in the cheeks, a little more airbrushing around the eyes. But I knew that smile. I knew the calculation behind it. I looked at the name of the company printed in gold foil at the top of the page. Vivera Wellness. Founder CEO Valerie Cross. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. Or perhaps, it just had a sense of justice. I picked up my pen. "Leave this with me." "Sarah," I said, "I think I have a head start on this one." The file on my desk was 3 inches thick, bound in a heavy navy folder with the Northbridge Integrity Partners logo embossed on the cover. Inside lay the financial soul of Vivera Wellness, the company seeking a $10 million injection from our client, a venture capital firm that specialized in female-led startups. I sat in my office, the Denver skyline turning purple in the twilight, and stared at page 4 of the prospectus. It was titled, "The Founder's Journey." There was a photo of Valerie, soft-lit and airbrushed, looking at the camera with a blend of wisdom and vulnerability. The text below it read, "As a single mother, I built Vivera not just for myself, but to show my daughter that resilience is the greatest inheritance. Every sacrifice I made to ensure she had a future." I felt a dry, bitter laugh catch in my throat. It was a beautiful story. It was perfect for investors who wanted to feel good about writing a check. The only problem was that it was a lie manufactured to cover up a decade of financial cannibalism. I turned to the financial appendices. My job was to vet the risk, to find the skeletons, and because I had spent the last 12 years studying the way Valerie moved money, I knew exactly where she buried the bones. I traced the line items for the initial capitalization of the company, dated 8 years ago. The source was listed as Founder's Personal Savings. The amount was exactly $32,000. I pulled up the spreadsheet from my personal investigation, the one I had built with Aunt Tessa years ago. The total amount drained from the Eleanor Ward Trust over a 4-year period, adjusted for the unauthorized credit card debt Valerie had racked up in my name, was exactly $32,000. She hadn't just stolen my college fund to buy luxury furniture or pay for Braden's mistakes. She had used it as seed money for this company. Vivera Wellness was built on the hollowed-out remains of my education. My intercom buzzed. "Delaney," my assistant Sarah said, "you have a video call on line 1. It is marked urgent." "He is the CEO of Vivera." I stared at the phone. She knew. Of course she knew. My name was on the due diligence request list sent over this morning. "Put it through," I said. I adjusted my blazer. I sat up straight. I clicked accept. The large monitor on my wall flickered to life. Valerie filled the screen. She was sitting in what looked like a hotel suite, wearing the same champagne-colored gown she would wear to the gala later that night. Her makeup was fresh, but her eyes were frantic. "Delaney," she breathed. I looked at her, my face a mask of professional detachment. "Hello, Ms. Cross," I said. "I am reviewing your file for the Series B funding round." "Don't do that," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't speak to me like a bank teller. I am your mother." I glanced down at the brand story in the open folder. "According to your prospectus, you are a single mother who sacrificed everything." I read aloud. "But according to my memory, you are the woman who told me that calling you mom was bad for your brand. Which version of the truth are we selling today?" "Valerie." She flinched. She looked away from the camera, wringing her hands. "I was young," she said fast. "I was under pressure. You have to understand. Delaney, the business world is cruel to women with baggage. I was trying to protect us. You were protecting yourself." I corrected her. "And now, I am looking at your initial capitalization records. You commingled trust fund assets with business equity, That is not just a red flag. Valerie, that is embezzlement. If I put this in my report, not only do you lose the $10 million, but the SEC will likely open an investigation. Vivera will be insolvent by Monday. Valerie's face crumbled. The powerful CEO vanished, replaced by the terrified woman I had seen in the kitchen 12 years ago. You cannot do that, she whispered. If this deal falls through, I lose the house. I lost the company. I have loans. Delaney, personal guarantees. They will take everything. Braden has legal fees coming up. I have nothing left. I waited. I let the silence stretch, heavy and suffocating. I missed you, she added, a desperate, non-sequitur attempt at manipulation. I have missed you every day. I looked at her. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the cold clarity of a transaction. You do not miss me, I said. You miss the money you could steal from me. And now you are afraid of the power I hold over you. She leaned into the camera, tears spilling over. Please, she begged. Just tell me what you want. I will do anything. I will give you shares. I will put you on the board. I do not want your shares. I said, I want the truth. I opened my drawer and pulled out a document I had drafted an hour ago, knowing this conversation was inevitable. I have 3 conditions. I said, anything. She sobbed. 1, I said, holding up a finger. You will sign a notarized confession admitting to the misuse of the Eleanor Ward Trust and the unauthorized use of my identity for credit applications. This document will remain sealed in my lawyer's safe, to be released only if you ever attempt to contact me or slander me again. She nodded frantically. Yes, okay, I will sign it. 2, I continued. You will agree to a repayment plan of the original $32,000, plus interest calculated at the market rate for the last 12 years. This will be deducted from your personal salary, not the company accounts. Yes, she said, I can do that. 3, I said, and this is the non-negotiable one. I leaned forward, looking directly into the camera lens. Tonight at the gala, you want me to come up on stage. You want the photo op. You want the reconciliation narrative to close the deal with the investors. Yes, she cried, hoping to flood her face. Yes, exactly. If they see us together, if they see you support me, the check clears tomorrow. Just come up. Just smile. Just call me Mom. I paused. I will come up on stage, I said, and I will address you. But I will not lie for you. Valerie, you want me to play the part of the daughter, fine, but you have to accept the reality of who you are. I want you to issue a public apology. I said, not for the money, but for the name. I want you to admit, in writing, that you forced me to relinquish my claim on you as a mother. Valerie froze. Her eyes darted to the side, calculating the risk. If I admit that publicly, she hissed, I look like a monster. You look like a monster because of what you did, not because of what you admit, I said. But here is the deal. If you sign the financial confession and agree to the repayment, I will not include the embezzlement finding in the Northbridge risk report. I will classify it as a historical family accounting error that has been rectified. The deal goes through. You keep your company. You keep your house. And in exchange, she asked, her voice tight. In exchange, I said, I will come to the gala. I accept the award. And we settle the debt of the last 12 years in front of the world. She stared at me. She hated me at that moment. I could see it. She hated that I held the keys to her kingdom. She hated that the daughter she had discarded was now the gatekeeper of her survival. Fine, she spat. I emailed the document to her instantly. Sign it, I said, and send it back, or I file the report in 10 minutes. I watched on the screen as she opened the file on her tablet. Her hand shook as she signed the digital confession. It was done. I had the leverage. I had the proof. She looked back at the camera. Her eyes were hard, the tears gone. I hope you are happy, she said low in her throat. I gave birth to you. I suffered for you, and you treat me like a criminal. I did not treat you like a criminal. Valerie, I said, reaching for the mouse to end the call. The law did. She slammed her hand on the table. You ungrateful little witch. she snarled, her voice rising to a scream. I should have. She stopped. She realized the light on her webcam was still on. She realized I was still the auditor. She realized she was one sentence away from losing $10 million. Her face spasmed. A terrifying shift from rage to faux submission. She smoothed her hair. She forced the corners of her mouth up. Mom is sorry, she stammered, the words sounding foreign and clumsy in her mouth. I will see you at the gala. Sweetie. The screen went black. I sat in the silence of my office. I looked at the signed confession in my inbox. I looked at the risk report on my desk. I picked up my pen and signed off on the Vivera wellness file. Approved with conditions. I stood up and walked to the closet where my dress for the evening was hanging. It was a sharp, structural piece, dark blue like a bruise. I wasn't going to the gala to reunite. I wasn't going to save her. I was going to finish the story she had started 16 years ago. She wanted a performance. She was going to get one. I checked my watch. The gala started in 2 hours. It was time to go call her by her name. The silence that followed the name Valerie was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and electric. It hung over the ballroom of the Summit Grand Hotel like a storm cloud that had finally broken. 500 heads turned. The investors in the front row, including Arthur Sterling, froze with their wine glasses halfway to their mouths. The live stream camera operators zoomed in, sensing blood in the water. Valerie did not move for a second. Her smile was frozen, a rictus of terror that clashed violently with the warm mother image she had been projecting all night. Then, survival instinct kicked in. She lunged toward the podium, her champagne-colored dress swishing aggressively as she tried to invade my space. She is tired, Valerie announced to the microphone. Her voice shrill and trembling, she reached for the stand, trying to pull it away from me. My daughter is confused. The stage lights are too bright. Let us give her a round of applause as she steps down. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the same spot she had bruised 12 years ago. Getting off the stage, she hissed under her breath, her eyes manic. You promised. You signed the deal. I did not pull away this time. I looked at her hand on my arm. Then I looked up at the sound booth. Leave the microphone on, I said clearly. The audio technician, confused but compelled by the sheer authority in my voice, obeyed. Valerie tried to cover the mic with her hand. Delaney, stop it. You are ruining everything. I turned to face the room. I stood tall, not as the 16-year-old girl who had been banished to the background, but as the vice president of Northbridge Integrity Partners. I am not confused, I said, my voice projecting calm, professional clarity across the stunned audience. And I am not just here as a daughter. I am here as the lead risk auditor for the Series B funding round regarding Vivera Wellness. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Arthur Sterling set his glass down. Valerie went pale. She let go of my arm as if I were burning. What are you doing? She whispered. I am doing my job. Valerie, I replied. I looked directly at the camera lens, knowing the feed was broadcasting to thousands of potential customers and investors. Northbridge Integrity Partners was hired to assess the character and financial stability of this company. I stated, and while we believe in the potential of the product, we have uncovered significant discrepancies in the brand narrative and the financial history of its founder. Valerie gasped, a sound that was amplified by the microphone. You liar, you promised you would approve the deal. I did approve the deal, I said coolly, conditional upon transparency, but transparency requires truth, not performance. I opened the blue folder I had carried onto the stage. The founder claims this company was built on the sacrifices of a single mother. I read from her own prospectus. She claims every dollar was hard-earned. However, the audit revealed that the initial capital of $32,000 was not personal savings. It was misappropriated from the Eleanor Ward Education Trust, a fund legally designated for her daughter's education. The room erupted. The polite silence shattered into shocked whispers. Valerie grabbed the edges of the podium, shaking it. She is lying. She screamed, abandoning all pretense of elegance. She is ungrateful. I raised her. I fed her. I looked at her. You did raise me. I said, you raised me to be a prop. I pulled a specific sheet of paper from the folder. October 14th, 3 years ago. I read aloud. Withdrawal of $4,000, labeled as tuition, used for a spa retreat in Sedona. I turned the page. January 12th, 2 years ago. Withdrawal of $6,000, used for a launch party. I looked at the front row, locking eyes with Graham Hale. July 8th, last year. Withdrawal of $3,500, used for white leather furniture and a down payment on a sports car for my brother. Braden Cross. Graham Hale stood up. He looked at Valerie, who was now weeping openly, her mascara running in dark streaks down her face. He looked at the investors, who were checking their phones and shaking their heads. Graham adjusted his jacket. I had no idea, he said loudly, addressing the room. I was told those funds were her inheritance. I have no part in this. He turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Valerie standing alone in the spotlight. Graham, Valerie shrieked. Graham, do not leave me. She turned back to me. She looked small now, the grand CEO, the visionary, the matriarch. It was all gone. There was just a desperate woman standing in the ruin of her own lies. Why are you doing this? She sobbed, holding her hands out to me. I just wanted you to call me Mom. That is all I wanted. I just wanted us to be a family again. The crowd went quiet, waiting for my reaction. It was the perfect manipulative line. It was designed to make me look like the villain, the cold daughter, rejecting a crying mother. I leaned into the microphone. I do not call you Mom because you told me not to, I said, my voice echoing off the back walls. Valerie froze. I was 16 years old. I continued. We were in your kitchen. You grabbed my face. You told me that the word Mom made you look old. You told me it damaged your brand. You told me to call you Valerie. I paused, letting the weight of that memory settle over the room. I was an obedient child. Valerie, I listened to you. I learned the lesson you taught me. You taught me that names are transactions. You taught me that relationships are only valuable if they serve your image. But I take it back, she stammered, falling to her knees on the stage. The fabric of her expensive dress pooled around her. Please, Delaney, please, give Mom a chance. I looked down at her. 12 years ago, I would have given anything for her to look at me with that much need. I would have begged for a crumb of affection, but I wasn't hungry anymore. I closed the folder. I am not destroying you. Valerie, I said, my voice softening just enough to be heard only by her in the front row. The deal is still on the table. The confession you signed in my office 2 hours ago ensures that you will repay the $32,000 with interest. You will step down as the sole trustee of the family estate, and Vivera Wellness will undergo quarterly third-party audits. She looked up at me, confusion warring with relief. You? You are still letting the money go through? Yes, I said, because unlike you, I do not use money to punish people. I use it to hold them accountable. I stepped back from the podium. But as for the name, I said, that is gone. You sold it for a lifestyle brand a long time ago. You cannot buy it back now just because the market has shifted. I turned to walk away. Delaney, she cried out. One last, desperate attempt to claim ownership. I stopped. I looked back at her over my shoulder. My name is Ms. Cross. I said. I walked off the stage. The applause that followed was confused, scattered, and hesitant, but I didn't care. I walked through the wings, past the stunned stage manager, and out the back exit door. The cold Denver air hit my face, sharp and clean. It smelled of pine and rain, not perfume and desperation. I pulled my phone from my clutch. I had 2 unread messages, one from Tessa, one from Reed. Tessa, I am watching the live stream. I have never been prouder. Reed. The legal team just got the signed confession. It is over. Dinner is on me when you get back. I typed a reply to both of them. 2 words. It is finished. I put the phone away. I walked down the street, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the pavement. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking away from something, I was walking toward myself. I didn't have a mother, and I didn't have a Valerie, and for the first time, that was absolutely fine. I had Delaney, and she was more than enough. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story and want to support the channel, please consider subscribing to Veronica Revenge Stories, liking this video, and hitting that hype button so we can share these stories with even more people. Your support means the world to me.